Hi, my name is Dali Parikh, and I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the OVBI team. And our mission is to transform India from the state of water poverty to water plenty by the year 2030. We had a very bumpy start last week, but this week we are really excited to have you join us and bring your friends and family along too. Few years ago, few of our very passionate Indian diaspora volunteers decided to form a non-partisan, non-religious group to provide their time and skill to make India better one step at a time. And Overseas Volunteers for a Better India was formed. The water team led by Datta Patil started a project in Halgara in Maharashtra 4 years ago with a very noble intention to address the farmer suicide in that region. Over the years, we learned that the core issue of all the challenges in rural India stem out of water poverty. We refined our vision to eliminate water poverty, to transform rural India, and now with the help of you, our volunteers, partners, and donors, we have built water infrastructure to rise the groundwater levels, replenish the aquifers, and revive rivers in 4 states: Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Rajasthan. We kick off this conversation series with the hope to inspire you to join our mission to eliminate water poverty in rural India by 2030 with us. We will introduce you to our leaders, water, soil, environment, and business experts, and also our execution teams to share their approaches, their vision to bring water security to millions of people in India. Now, we also know that Israel has been and is a pioneer in the area of water management, sharing knowledge and expertise in 150 countries to solve this global challenge. Our guest today is Aviv from Israel Export Institute. Aviv and Manu will talk about how Israel approaches the water problem, their learnings and their successes, how these learnings can apply in India, and Israel's vision of making a difference with water across the world. We hope to leave you inspired with this conversation today. Please share the information about this water series with your friends and family, and to join us in this conversation and help us scale this movement with your time, networks, and donations. With that, I will introduce you to our speakers.
It's projected by the year 2025 that some 60% of the world's landmass and billions of people will find themselves in a water-scarce situation. At a minimum, the world will face economic challenges from this water scarcity. At a maximum, the world will face a grave humanitarian crisis. Hundreds of millions of people suddenly find themselves in places where there once was water, but there no longer is. And therefore, I became concerned about what this would mean for the world at large. I began looking into it, and to my amazement, I discovered that a little country, a very dry country, in the middle of the driest region of the world, had the answers and the solutions to an ever drier world. That country, a country that is 60% desert, is Israel. Sometimes I'm asked, what is the one great part of the Israel water equation? And the answer really isn't that it is only one great thing, but that it's many important things. Israel has a multifaceted, kind of all of the above strategy where they think that there are many techniques that are valuable. And so it's everything from good governance and smart pricing and smart technology and encouraging conservation and constantly encouraging new and better approaches to agriculture, which consumes large amounts of water, constantly challenging itself to make better use of its water in homes and cities. And all of that together has led to a better water story for Israel, and soon, I think, for the world. And it's not a surprise that it is drip irrigation that comes out of Israel, or that desalination has made rapid advances in the drop of the price of desalinated water out of Israel. And it's not a surprise that Israel leads the world by a very large margin in the reuse of treated wastewater. Today around the world, 150 countries have some form of engagement with Israel over water. And that's a remarkable number, because there aren't 150 countries with which Israel has diplomatic or commercial relations. Water is a way of engaging others. It's a pathway to peace. In March of 2014, the drought in California grew so severe that California Governor Jerry Brown invited the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to come to California to enter into a formal memorandum of understanding in which Israel and California would work together to try to solve severe problems of California, and most particularly in the area of water scarcity. That same type of cooperation now is going on in state after state in the United States, Colorado and Nevada and many others. Although India famously, at least in the West, is thought of as having massive amounts of water because of the annual monsoon, in fact, the monsoon falls very quickly in a short period of time. It's hard to capture all of that water, and most of it runs off. And so what Israel is helping India to do, through the drip irrigation miracle invented in Israel, is to find a way to get larger crop yields with actually less water than they've ever used before. For many years, many years, Israel has sent hydrologists and agriculturalists to Egypt, to Jordan, and to other countries to assist them in getting the highest yield for the use of water that they have. It's not widely known, but Israel provides the Palestinian Authority with 55% of the water that it uses in the West Bank and a significant amount of water in Gaza as well. Israel had an open door policy for Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, engineers, water administrators from these territories to come into Israel for 5- and 6-day seminars where they would be taught, usually in Arabic, by Israeli agriculturalists and Israeli water scientists on the very best practices that they could take back to their home communities. As Africa rises in its development scale, it will need ever greater amounts of water. And here too, Israel has been a great partner to many, mostly sub-Saharan African nations. It has sent people into Africa to help train them on how to get the highest yield per unit of water. Little by little, these Israeli programs in sub-Saharan Africa have had a profound impact on the lives of really millions of Africans. Israel can help them as well in figuring out ways of training people in conservation and making the highest, best use of the water that they have. And that's fortunate because now the world is now going into a situation very similar to what Israel has experienced, but Israel has prepared itself for it. And now the world doesn't have to spend decades doing what Israel did, but simply has to learn from Israel and to adapt those techniques and technologies and practices. Israel is a friend, a partner, and a solution in country after country, region after region.
Hello there. Hey, Aviv, welcome to this conversation, and thank you for that video. That's very, very inspiring.
Thank you very much to you, Manu, and thank you, Dolly, and the whole team of OVBI for having me today.
Wonderful. Now, would love to start the conversation, but before I do that, I just wanted to, just follow up with what Dolly said, right, about what OVBI does, right? And I would highly recommend people who are not familiar with what OVBI does to watch the really excellent seminar that we did last week, Sunday, same time, where our leaders, Bibi Jagdishji, Mohan Trikhaji, and Satej Chaudharyji, all of them walked through the challenge that India faces and how we're looking to address that, right? So it's a good overview to understand the challenge as well. And our goal at OVBI is we've been doing this work for the past couple of years in India. We've had some really good successes, and our goal is to build on that foundation of success with partners such as yourself and expertise that somebody brings from Israel to take it to the next level. Our vision is to take India from water poverty to water plenty by 2030. Right? It's an ambitious goal. And that's why we're excited to talk to you, right? And this video is so inspiring, and to learn the impact of Israel's kind of pioneering work in water, right? So could you give us a little bit of a sense of the history of how this evolved?
Of course. First of all, after this quick but very good video, I don't think I need to elaborate about Israel's situation. I think it says pretty much everything. But if we can go back a little bit to when Israel established in 1948, we came to a desert. You heard on the video that Israel is 60% desert.
Yes.
You're located in the Middle East, and for now it's 60%. We're trying to reduce it.
Yeah.
But when in 1948, almost of every place in Israel was a desert. And when Israel was established, Jewish people from all over the world came to Israel. They had a home for the first time in their lives, and they started to walk the ground, to prepare it to be edible, to live there.
Yes.
And that is how we started to think about water infrastructure, because there was no infrastructure at all. So we started with the planning, with the infrastructure, and then we came up with a water authority, which is the regulator of Israel right now. Yeah. And together with Mekorot, which is the national company of Israel, which established, I think, 50 years before even Israel was established, then we had the chance to start and work and spread the infrastructure from north to the south. It was a tremendous task, and it was step by step, and it included a lot of engineering work, a lot of knowledge and know-how that people from all over the world gathered around and shared their knowledge to overcome the barrier of water scarcity. So this is just in a nutshell when we established.
No, wonderful. So the part of it, what I hear is it was forced, right? There's nothing else. You had desert, and you had to really work that, right? So that is pretty amazing. And the fact that a lot of people came there to help, and now you're looking at, okay, how do we kind of pay it forward, because we have solved a lot of these issues, right? So as you see the history and as you see it progressing down, right? What changes, like from the first time the water authority was developed and you guys started building this thing? What changes have you seen in the benefits and how things have happened, right? To how it manages its water today, right? So there was an interesting clip that said, okay, Israel has an all of the above strategy, right? So could you walk us through that? Some of it. How was technology? How was policy? Yeah.
Of course. There is a say that says that necessity is the mother of all innovation.
Yes.
And because there was a necessity which tried from the get-go to try to be innovative about the approach of the water situation in Israel. It started, we know desalination is a big issue. Probably in Israel, it's one of the most hot topics if you ask people. But I think it's a topic with the past 2 decades. For the past 20 years, I think everybody is talking about desalination. But most people do not know that our first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, started to think about desalination from the early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
The first desalination plant was supposed to be a kind of technology that you freeze the water and then you can desalinate, not reverse osmosis as we know in these days. So maybe the methods were a little bit old, but we already tried to think ahead to come up with solutions that will help us to try and stay with our heads above water and not have an issue when you have water scarcity 365 days a year.
Yeah. So how was the, I know that there was a lot of technology involved in this, right? Can you tell us a little bit about the policy and what the government did to encourage people to follow that path?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, we have the Water Authority. The Water Authority is not one of the ministries. It's not part of the government of Israel. It's a body which is without any politics. There was a decision around, I think, 30 years ago that have decided to extract the Water Authority from the different ministries and have them as one body which will regulate all the water situation. So we have only one body who controls all the water utilities here in Israel. And in that sense, we can manage our water infrastructure better when from the before, when we used to.
Interesting. So the water for agriculture, the water for drinking, the water that goes into wastewater and gets recycled, desalination, all that stuff is done by a single centralized authority that is non-political.
Exactly. We have now in Israel 5 desalination plants. The biggest one is called Sorek. Sorek is supposed to be one of the 3 biggest desalination plants in the world. And we're building now 2 more desalination plants. The largest one will called Sorek 2, which will be near the one in Sorek. And he's supposed to be the largest one in the world. And he's supposed to produce, if I'm not mistaken, 170 million cubic meters. And besides that, the second pillar, if the desalination is the first pillar, the second pillar is the wastewater treatment. From the get-go, we understood that wastewater treatment is one of the important sources that we need to take care of. So we have a big wastewater treatment plant, which is called Shafdan. And Shafdan is now treating all of the center, the wastewater, all of the center of Israel. And with the water that we reuse in the Shafdan, it is helping us to irrigate the southern part of Israel, which is a desert. It's practically a desert.
Interesting. So the idea is that it's a full cycle kind of an approach that's saying that, okay, we need to make sure that we create water, but how do we even use the water that we have created really well, right? And I think so there's another interesting thing that I picked up is that there's very little loss, right? You guys call it the non-revenue water. That's, very small, extremely small percentage of water that's, that ever gets lost. And so that is actually maybe part of this whole cycle as well, right?
Exactly. So maybe I can share a little bit about the numbers.
Yeah.
For example, in desalination, we are desalinating 80% of our drinking water, which is a tremendous number. We are treating 95% of the wastewater, and from that we are reusing for irrigation something like 85%. And regarding NRW, non-revenue water, water that goes to waste, Israel is currently up to something like 8%. And
8%.
You can ask 8%, and you can ask me, listen, Aviv, 8% sounds like a whole lot of water that goes to lost. It's almost 10%. 10% of Israel's water that goes into the infrastructure is going to waste. So the answer is yes. And the more problematic answer is that the average globally is something like 30%. That means that 1/3 of the water all over the world is going to waste.
That is unbelievable, right? And I know that in certain parts of India, or certain parts of the world, it goes up to even 40%. So there's a lot of water wasted, and this non-revenue side of it also points to the fact that there is a control around, just making sure that we utilize the water as much as possible, right? So this is This is interesting. The other thing that I thought that was very intriguing about the clip was Israel has relationships with water, partnerships around water with about 150 countries across the globe, right? The fact that you have solved a lot of these problems, and India is actually one of them. India is one of the big partners that you do, and the innovations you have in drip irrigation is what's used in India, right?
Mm-hmm.
So could you tell us how these partnerships work?
Yes, of course. Maybe I can share a little bit information about my organization, and then maybe it will make sense how it works. I am part of from the Israel Export Institute, and we are a non-profit organization like you guys, but we are semi-governmental, and our job is to create business opportunities for the Israeli companies that want to export outside of Israel. So basically what we do, we are doing the matchmaking between the Israeli companies that we are on a daily based contact with global players. So what is happening, we are in contact with two different ministries in Israel. We have the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Economy has something like 45 commercial attaches that are spread around the world. And of course, we have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which have Israel's embassies. And together with them, we are gathering requests for technology solutions. It can be with countries, of course, that have relationships, and it can be, of course, under the table. That means that we try to help everyone. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you had water issues, we'll do our best to help you.
No, that's wonderful. It's the clip that I saw is that Israel helps with 150 countries, which is more than the people that you have relationships.
Yes.
With, right? Place like India, where I believe you said that you have 3 attaches or so. How does that process actually work? You get requests from the people to help you, and how does that? If you can give a short clip of how that works.
Of course, we're working with all of the organization. It can be governmental, it can be municipal, industrial. It doesn't matter. They approach to the embassies or to the economic mission that sits outside of Israel. They belong to the Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the commercial attaches and the ambassadors approach us and asking us, listen, Aviv, we got approach from this organization that ask for specific technology to help them with a specific need. And what we do, we understand the need of the organization, the country, whoever approach, and then we give them a map of different companies or different methods that can be most suitable for them to help them with their problem. This is how it works. For example, we had 2 delegations from India. One, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, from India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, which came to Israel to learn about the different collaboration that we can do together. And he even meet one of some of the technology companies here in Israel to understand how we can work together about the water shortage in both places. And besides that, last year, if you're familiar with WATEC, WATEC is Israel's largest water exhibition here in Israel, and we hosted the Federal Minister of Water of India. If I'm not mistaken, his name is Gajendra Shekhawat. I hope I pronounced it right. And he also came with his team to learn how we can collaborate together and share knowledge.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I think, this is the kind of partnership that we hope to continue going forward, right? As would you be able to give us a couple of examples, right? It doesn't have to be in India, maybe in other places of the work that you have done, that people might find surprising, that you think, hey, they have enough water. What can Israel help there?
Okay, so because of water is a source that everybody consumes, and like I said, water is it's now in a place that we have water scarcity all over the world, and we see water situations in many countries, even countries that we didn't think that they will have water situations. We can go to the most understandable places that they don't have water, like Africa, and we have different solutions that we ship to areas in Africa, villages without water. The technology is coming to help. For example, we have technology here in Israel that is made with a water filter.
Yeah.
A very unique water filter that can be shipped in a container and then can produce manually with a water pump clear water from any source of water to any village that needs help. And if I can take it maybe to places that most people do not know that they have water problems, for example, Scandinavia. We can see. Yeah, very interesting. You can, Manu, you can think to yourself, why Aviv is mentioning Scandinavia? They have tremendous amount of water.
Yes.
So the answer is yes, they have a tremendous amount of water, but at the same time, they have many floods. We can see all over the world that the periods of the rain is it's maybe a little bit shorter, but much stronger.
More intense, yes.
That means that it's much more difficult to do rain harvesting, to harvest the water from the rain and use it to consume the water as drinking water. And last example that from the top of my head is Australia. Australia had just a few months ago, we saw a huge wildfire that spread out all over of the continent, and the wildfire destroyed a lot of the infrastructure of Australia's water utilities. And in every of those cases, we saw a request for help or collaboration with different organizations.
No, that is, the climate change is an interesting thing that you bring up. Like right now, we are sitting here in California, and as you know, there are lots of wildfires happening right now. California is facing some of the biggest wildfires in the history of the state, and where we're sitting, it's not that far from here. In fact, the place that we live in is a little bit of a evacuation warning zone. So
wow.
we see that we see that live, that these things are happening and how climate change is impacting this thing. And what you said is absolutely true. Like even in India, the monsoons have become significantly more intense. They used to have a longer season. Now, even though the season might be there, the amount of rain that comes down in bursts is significantly more intense. And that kind of causes us to not able to store the water as much as you can. Like, for example, I was born in a place in India, or that's where I grew up, which had about 500 inches of rain. It's a place called Cherrapunji, right? It's in the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest amount of annual rainfall. And there are other parts of India which just get maybe an inch of rain, right? So there's so much diversity in how people can get access to rain, right? So just thinking about your example in Scandinavia and stuff like that, what is it that a country like India can do to store water, because the challenge that we face is maybe not the amount of water that we get, even though that's diverse across the globe, but nearly 80% of the water that we receive in our annual monsoon just flows into the ocean, right? So what do you think, based on your experiences, we can do to store more of that water?
So in the case of India, I think it's all about planning and planning the water management, because if you need to extract as many as water as you can, you need to plan it first. There's not much of technology solutions with the situation of rain harvesting. It's all about the water management. We do have companies here in Israel, engineering companies, that can help with that situation. You need to assess the situation, why you cannot harvest the water, and start to think maybe to collaborate with different states around you. Because if there is a specific river or different water reservoirs that your neighbor is using, you need, if we talked about Manu, the sharing knowledge, so this is a big place of sharing knowledge as well. Different states need to think together how they can help one another, and to understand better how we can manage our water. For example, I mentioned the water authority, only one regulator that controls everything. When you have a specific body, when he is the one that's supposed to take care of this situation, I think it's much more efficient and much more effective to plan it ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I also like what you said about metrics, right? So there are some really quantifiable metrics that you shot for, saying, we need to reduce the non-revenue water. If it was 30% someplace else, we need to bring it below 10%, right? And we need to make sure that the number of 85% of your wastewater is going to. So the idea that you have a very good set of metrics that you're tracking against, and it is something that is kind of controlled from a policy perspective, centrally. I think that those are really fantastic suggestions on how some of the things that we could also learn from, right? It's not just the pure technology side of it, right? I think so. It's kind of switching back. One of the focuses of OVBI is rural water, right? How do we help farmers, right? That's the main thing that we think about day in and day out, right? And I know that you guys have done some impressive work in rainwater harvesting, etc. The big challenges in rural India is obviously the lack of funds, right? We are a large country, with the big chunk of that living in rural areas, a lack of funds for expensive technology solutions, right? So how do you see a way around that, around the massive investments that potentially may be needed for some more targeted approaches, something a little bit more policy oriented that can achieve results?
First of all, I think that the situation with the financing is very difficult all over the world. I think there are no investments right now in the world. I think that all of the water sector globally is now in stagnation. We don't see any request to finance any water infrastructure, and even in the water technologies, there are not many organizations that are trying to tackle this situation. But there are some. I had the chance to work with financing organizations that are trying to solve, even together with us, this problem. For example, you have the World Bank. For example, you have the WG 2030. That both of these organizations, I know, works in India, and they are helping with the financing of the different countries or different places in the world and help them to get the finance for their projects. We can see it in India, we can see it in South America, even in Africa. This organization, the help of their finance help us to implement technologies. I mentioned before that we have the engineering companies here in Israel. We have some major engineering companies here in Israel. And when they win a specific project from the World Bank, then they can help the different countries that are involved in that. So this is just one example of financing that I think can be fruitful in India.
No, that is true. I think there are lots of different sources of funds in order to access this. One of the things that we are also doing at OVBI is taking a little bit of a bottoms-up approach as well. Part of it is how do you educate the farmers, right? If we are able to educate them on some of the good best practices and simple interventions that they can do themselves, then that goes a long way as well in some of the farmers doing some of the things themselves, right? In lieu of, so there's obviously a top-down approach of how you can do some of these things, but there's also education, right? So, in your experience in Israel, obviously you guys have such incredible knowledge about how this thing works, right? How have you seen the value of educating the people in the ground being valuable in addressing some of these concerns?
So, like you, Manu, we think that getting to the roots, it's the most important thing. When Israel was established, educating the youngsters that every drop counts was one of the most important issues. For example, we have here in Israel the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus walked over the water.
Yes.
So Israel is obsessed with the Sea of Galilee because 10 years ago, this is another fun fact. 10 years ago, we consumed our water 80% from the Sea of Galilee. Today, you consume 80% of from the desalination and only something like 8% from the Sea of Galilee. The
Interesting.
Sea of Galilee, from in 10 years, it's totally the opposite. So the Sea of Galilee was the thing that everybody looked upon to see if the sea dropped down or go up, because then everybody, if it goes up, everybody's happy. If it goes down, everybody is sad. And this is the topic of the day.
Yes.
And this is also right now, although we do not consume almost water from the Sea of Galilee, the education was very important to understand that we need to take personal action.
Yes.
We need to take shorter showers. We need to close the tap when we're showering and we're soaking ourselves.
Yes.
We need to understand that if we want to irrigate our landscape, we need to do it properly. And that is why Israel come up with the drip irrigation.
Yes.
I don't know if you know, drip irrigation is something that everybody tried to implement all over the world. But as far as I know, only 20% of all of water's irrigation is drip irrigation. And drip irrigation saves a tremendous amount of water.
Yes.
Something that we have engineering from the late 40s called Simcha Blas.
Yes.
And there is a story with Simcha when he walked down the aisle. And in the aisle, you saw many trees in one line. And he saw that all of the trees is in the same height. Instead, but besides one tree, he saw that only one tree was a little bit higher from the rest of the trees.
Yes.
But all the trees was planned at the same time. He decided to look on the specific point where this tree is growing, and he saw a hose, irrigating hose that has
Small hole.
a small hole inside.
Oh, interesting.
This is how drip irrigation started. He
Interesting.
saw that there is a small leak, very small leak, and then he started to work on it in his university and to examine it, and then the technology of drip irrigation started. And
Interesting.
we now understand that if you lose less water, it's better for the irrigation. Yeah, for the crops, exactly. The flood irrigation is something that I think, my own opinion, that should vanish entirely.
No, this is so fascinating, right? I think people are not necessarily used to this. I think, and what you also talk about is the education side of it, right? In India, unfortunately, we use a lot of bore wells, and the farmers use a lot of bore wells to go deep underground to get the water, and this could be a little bit of how you think about whether it's perverse incentives or the government is generous with electricity to the farmers, saying that, hey, we want to make sure that you get enough electricity, but the electricity is used to pump water day and night, right? Because you're getting that, so a lot of water gets used, and this becomes like a domino effect, right? Because you get electricity, you're like, okay, I'm going to just pump enough water, and a lot of water just comes up, and the water level has been dropping from 50 feet to now maybe 500 feet in certain areas, right? So what you said is just kind of education and just reversing some of that stuff and saying, look, you don't need to flood it. Even if you just do drip irrigation, that can actually be better for the crops. It's not just, right? And that's, I think, is fascinating. A lot of people have this perception that, hey, if it is rice or paddy, I have to do this way. I've been doing it for so long that way. But thinking about it a little bit differently, is very valuable.
Yeah, everybody in the world, sometimes we have technologies that we learned in the past, and we need to change maybe the way we think to start different methods and start helping them. For example, like you mentioned, the flooding or the drip irrigation. We need to educate first, so people will understand that there are other ways, and we need to think differently. Also, about the subject of maybe it's not very popular to say it, but the pricing of the water.
Yes,
the small citizen is concerned because in many places all over the world, the price of water is a little bit high. For example, in Israel, I pay, I don't know what is the rate in India, for example, it's something like $2, $2 per cubic meter. And most of the citizens will try to lower down the price of the water because they want to pay less. But in my opinion, I think all over the world we need to start charging money, and this money is not only for delivering the water, is also to make sure that the water quality is good, that everybody should have access for water, to overcome obstacles of water shortage, water scarcity. We are anticipating that we'll have many problems ahead. We saw just 2 years ago the water situation in Cape Town, in South Africa. Millions of people without any water. Just 2 years ago, it happened. Billions of people without any running water. You saw people with buckets that are trying to fill the buckets and bring them back to home. And this situation is going to increase. And not only in countries in Africa, it's supposed to be worldwide. There is a very interesting article from the BBC that came out right after the day zero that happened in South Africa and Cape Town, that said that problems like Cape Town is going to be in the United States, to be even in Japan, in Indonesia, in India, in many places. We'll see that water scarcity will go high, and we need to think first how to manage it before it comes to a crisis. And we saw even also in India the situation with the lake, if I'm not mistaken, Lake Puzal in Chennai.
In Chennai, that's right. It was a zero water city, Chennai. Absolutely, exactly. You're spot on. That's right, and we expect to have around 21 or 22 more cities like that coming up soon, right? So you're 100% right that pricing also plays a role in how conservation and education happens.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So no, this is wonderful. I think I know that we could continue to go on, but the last question that I want to ask is, right, why do you feel like that sharing these techniques about water management is important for you, for Israel, and for the Export Institute? Why is this such a big deal?
First of all, because I don't think I have all the answers. We need to understand that we don't know everything. Every country doesn't know everything. That is why sharing knowledge is so crucial. We need to take case studies from other countries and to learn from that. Because if we learn from the different countries, then we'll have enough information to tackle our own issues. And I think the most important thing is to everybody that will understand that the water situation is not per country. It's a global situation.
That's right.
And if it's a global situation, we need to address it as a global sharing knowledge, because this is the only way that we can overcome the barriers and the obstacles. And if we learn from one another and help one another, then we'll get to a situation that water scarcity will reduce dramatically.
100% agree. 100%. That is spot on and so inspiring to hear. With that, what I'd like to do is just, since we are going live, would like to open it up for questions to see if there's somebody in the audience that has any questions for Aviv. Please ask some. Dolly, do we have any questions? Okay. I think when from my side, I think when I was having this conversation, I think it's very interesting for me to see that a country that pretty much has 60% desert is the one that's innovating and pulling everybody through to help to help the world. Actually, there's a question that just came up right in Israel. If you guys have a policy around plastic water bottles, and how that's kind of controlled.
So first of all, I would say that my job is the manager of the water sector. So everything that goes into clean tech, I don't have all the answers, but yes, we are trying to recycle almost everything. There is now an approach all over the world of circular economy. That means that we try to use to reuse almost everything. If it's water bottles, or even do not use water bottles at all. In my home and in different homes in Israel, we try to not use plastic water bottles and be environmentally as much as we can. And by the way, there is also a problem now that all of the world are trying to approach. I know the World Bank is also trying to solve it, which is the microplastic in the ocean. And this is an approach that we received requests for technology solutions in that area, and there are a few Israeli water companies that can address those issues as well. So, like I said, the idea of circular economy is something is on the rise, and we need to do it not only municipally and from the government, also in domestically in our households.
Yeah. And okay, so this is an interesting question from BVG. How much of the wastewater recycling is being used for agriculture, and is there any resistance from people adapting it? Right. I think this is you mentioned about 85% of the wastewater is used for recycling. But so, is there any resistance from people? Do they feel, oh my God, it's wastewater that's recycled?
First of all, I will answer about the numbers.
Yes.
Because, like I said, it's 95% of reusing the water, and from that, 85% is recycling and irrigating. So 85% from the 95 goes to irrigation. And the answer for the question if people are against it, so the answer is no, because you know that when you farm, you need to have compost in the land. So wastewater treatment, don't forget that there is a process that cleans the water, and the water are good for irrigation. You have the first separation, and you have the secondary treatment and the tertiary treatment. So the irrigation is done by tertiary treatment, and then we irrigate the land. The water is in a situation that they only help to increase the different irrigation of the land. The other thing, and maybe I'm a little bit going a little bit to the future, is not to talk about if they have resistance from citizens to irrigate with the wastewater. Maybe even think if we can drink our wastewater.
Yes.
For now, maybe this idea it's a little bit weird, and the citizen should ask what Aviv and Manu are talking about. Drinking wastewater, that sounds crazy.
Some space station stuff.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that drinking water from wastewater, I think this is the future.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because until now, we haven't found a way to reduce the electricity to the desalination. Desalination costs a lot of money, and not only that it costs a lot of money, we don't know if it's bad for the environment or not, and we don't know if we extract all of the minerals from the water. This is the reverse osmosis. It extracts everything, even the good minerals, and then you need to implement it after this process once again before you have it as drinking water. So instead of that, maybe we need to take the wastewater, which is 90% of water, and treat them to a way that we can drink the water. I know that maybe methodically we need to think about it, and the the regulation will be tremendously hard before something with that will happen. But my opinion that this is the future.
No, I 100% agree. There were a couple more questions that came up, and maybe I'll combine them too. Do you know of any specific projects that Israel is working on in India? That
yes.
you might. Okay.
In fact, I'm one of the people that we have a G2G project that we're trying to start from the get-go with the government of India and with the office of our Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the ambassador in India, ambassador of Israel in India. We're trying now to think of different technologies, including desalination, if it's large plants or even small plants that can be helpful in many places. We know that we talked about companies in Israel of engineering companies that can plan and execute large infrastructure plans. But not only that, we have also companies, Israeli tech companies that have plug-and-play solutions. That means if we have a specific problem in an area and you need a solution right now, we have companies that can ship a container with it's like a small desalination unit in a container, or a small small wastewater treatment unit in a container. So we have some of those companies that can maybe help with this situation, because a very long infrastructure costs a lot of money. And if you need a solution, a pinpoint solution that will be much lower cost, then you need the plug-and-play solutions, which is also very efficient.
No, wonderful, yeah. Very true. We could continue going, a lot more questions and a lot more conversations, but I know we're coming to the end of our time. But we'll continue this conversation going forward to understand more, right? And to the audience who've been listening in, we hope this conversation with Aviv was valuable. It was informative, but also importantly inspired you to get a little bit more active in solving this water crisis, right? Obviously in India and across the world, as Israel is doing. Our goal is to have similar live sessions like this every Sunday around 10 o'clock. And right now we have a great lineup of speakers all the way till nearly to the end of the year, right? Every Sunday from now till I think till the end of November, we have already booked up. So it's fascinating. You can go to our website, eliminatingwaterpoverty.org, and look at all those speakers and the topics that they're going to speak about, right? Many experts believe that, India, actually the world, has very little time to really address this water problem, right?
I'm one of them.
A decade or so. Yeah, absolutely.
Not expert. Yeah, just one of the people that think that we don't have enough time.
We don't have that much time. Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So we need all the help, right? All of us need all the help. And that's why, as Aviv is saying, right, it's about, we need to share knowledge, we need to share expertise, because water is a common asset for the entire globe, right? And that's why we would love for each one of you listening to participate in any way you can, right? Share this information that you glean from this conversation, talk to your friends, educate others, volunteer with us, or come to in any capacity that you want, or come to eliminatingwaterpoverty.org and also donate. So we would love that. I just wanted to thank you, Aviv, for such a wonderful conversation. This was very, very exciting, and we hope to continue more.
Manu. It was my pleasure.
No, absolutely our pleasure as well. And thank you so much for everybody for listening in and tuning in for this conversation. And see you next Sunday at 10 o'clock for the next conversation. Thank you so much.